Hi, welcome to another session. Now I know many of you get into a big debate about whether you should learn British English or American English. Today I want to tell you something else. Learn Canadian English. I was born and raised in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as some of you know, which is on the east coast of Canada. And here in Canada, we have a very interesting take on English. Because the British colonized Canada, we learned British grammar and British composition in school, but we watch American TV. So we kind of get the best of both, or the worst of both, depending on how you look at it. So when I grew up in Canada, we were exposed to both British and American English. And that created a very, very interesting scenario for us. So do you know how to spell Canada? C-A-N-A-D-A-A. So that's kind of a play on the words, on the word Canada. In Canada, even when we learned English in school, little things made a difference. So for example, the alphabet. When you learn the alphabet in Canada, you learn it in the British system. So it's ABC, which is the same as America, but when you get to the end, we learn X, Y, Z. In America, they say X, Y, Z. So in Canada, we follow the British system. We use Z. Growing up in Canada, we had lots of interesting things. We don't drink soda in Canada. We drink pop. So when you buy a soft drink and you are going with your friend, you say, let's go for a pop. And when you want to spend money, we have interesting names for our money as well. A $1 coin, we call it a loonie. Not because it's crazy, but because there's a bird on the $1 coin, which is called a loonie. A few years later, they put out a coin for $2. And the $1 coin being called a loonie, the $2 coin was called a toonie. Very cute. In Canada, we use the metric system, very much like Britain. We do not use the old imperial system. But when I was growing up, even the imperial system of using gallons and quarts and cups, there's American imperial and then there's British imperial. So a gallon in Canada was not the same as a gallon in America. So lots of little odd things that we grew up with. Later, when we switched to using the metric system, we still developed our own slang. So we don't go a kilometer, we count them by clicks. So we say, how many more clicks before we get to Toronto? How many more kilometers before we get to Toronto? We use clicks instead of kilometers. We also wear interesting clothing. In Canada, we wear a ski hat, which we call a toque. Toque. And that's a hat that almost everybody wears in Canada when they go out in cold weather. So be sure if you go to Canada, buy yourself a toque, and then you will look more Canadian. Now, for social life in Canada, the favorite spot to go for adults, if you're living in a city or in a bigger town, is to go to the Legion on Friday night. But that's Friday night, Saturday night, you go to the Legion. One night is usually a dance and a social, and one night is usually to kind of have a few drinks. That's what you go to the Legion for, good cheap drink, if you drink. The other place people like to socialize in Canada is at a place, it's a donut shop. It's called Tim Hortons. Tim Horton was a hockey player who started a donut chain. Became very famous and went from coast to coast. All over Canada you can find a Tim Hortons. But Canadians have nicknamed it as an institution, and we call them Timmies. Timmies. So let's go to Timmy's for a drink. Let's go to Timmy's for a coffee. And one of the most famous foods from Timmy's, besides their donuts, and if you ever go there, make sure you get the honey cruller. That's my absolute favorite. They announced they were selling the holes from the donuts, and they were called Timbits. Timbits. And there was a joke going around in Canada when Timbits came out that, well, I won't tell you that. You can ask a Canadian friend what a Timbit is and what the joke is, and they'll tell you. When we invited our friends over to our house, We didn't say, have a seat on the sofa or have a seat on the couch. We said, sit on the Chesterfield. Yeah, we call them Chesterfields. This is after a lord from England. His name was Lord Chesterfield. So we have a Chesterfield. And when we have lunch or dinner and we have our friends over, we do not ask for a napkin. No, we ask for a serviette. A serviette. Now, as you growing up in Canada, people, to me, they talked a bit strange. So one of the things they would talk about was going to pick up a Mickey. When I first heard that, I was like, gonna go pick up a Mickey? What's a Mickey? A Mickey is only in Canada, is a small bottle of liquor. It's like 370 ml, something like that. It's called a Mickey. So if your friend's going to the liquor store, you'd say, hey Joe, can you pick me up a Mickey of something when you're at the liquor store? And what do you do with all that liquor? Well, if you're getting married, you're going to have a stag, which is short for stag party. So all the men, all the best men, all the friends of the man who's getting married will have a stag. And if you're a woman, you'll have a stagette. Stageette. And if you have too much to drink at the stag, you're going to get into a fight or an argument. And we have a very good term for that in Canada. We call that a kerfuffle. Kerfuffle. That's an argument, heated argument. Sometimes can turn into a fight, a kerfuffle. And if a person people don't like, they don't respect, they call him a hoser, Hoser. In the East, we call him a hosebag. Who's that hosebag you were with the other night? In Eastern Canada, in the Maritimes, a lot of people are collecting unemployment. They're not working. They get 60 or 70% of their salary that they were earning when they were working from the government. And we call that POGIE, P-O-G-I-E. So we say, are you on POGIE? Means, are you on unemployment? Are you getting money from the government? Another way to say that is, are you on the dole? D-O-L-E. Are you on the dole? Now, I grew up in a place called Halifax, Nova Scotia. It's named after a place in Britain, Halifax. And you're going to love this. This is a reason you really have to sit down and make your own lists of words if you want to sound local, if you want to sound like a native. Someone from New York is called a New Yorker. Someone from Boston is called a Bostonian. But someone from Halifax is called a Haligonian. Haligonian. So only people from Halifax know they're Haligonians. So these are things you need to learn when you're settling in a new place. What are the local terms, the local language that people use? In Nova Scotia, everybody is a blue noser. A blue noser. The Blue Nose was a very famous sailing ship from Nova Scotia. So anyone who's from Nova Scotia is a blue noser. If you're from one of the island, the big island off Nova Scotia is called Cape Breton. We refer to those people as capers, Cape Bretoners. If you're from any of the maritime provinces, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland, we say you're a maritimer, because those provinces are the maritime provinces. Newfoundland, which I just mentioned, didn't come into the Dominion of Canada until 1949. It was the last province to come in. And people from Canada, from the other 9 provinces, always like to make jokes about Newfoundlanders. Or, for short, we call them Newfies. They even have jokes called Newfie jokes, or Noofs, N-E-W-F. For the last 7 years that I lived in Canada, I lived in a small place, Canada's smallest province, called Prince Edward Island. Prince Edward Island. And we also had our own language. So we didn't have driveways in Prince Edward Island. We had gangways. So park your car up the gangway. And when the roads were icy, we didn't say the roads were slippery. We said the roads are slippy. Careful driving tonight, the roads are mighty slippy. And when we tear a building down, this is very interesting. In English, we say we raise a building up. And we raze, R-A-Z-E, a building down. But in Prince Edward Island, when they tear a building down, they said they're going to riz her up. R-I-Z-H-E-R-U-P. Riz her up. Only in Prince Edward Island. It's a very local thing. So it's very important, wherever you go, even if you're only going for a small trip, learn to use the local language. So this is the end of our session on Canadian slang. So don't worry about British or American slang. Think Canadian. Eh?